This is Frank Stanisci, and I got to tell you, David, how's your day going? My day's going pretty interesting.
Very interesting. I'm in recovery of a wasp bite that I got yesterday. I've
Ooh, I know
never experienced one in my life, and I never want to experience it again.
it is a sudden jarring feeling, isn't it?
Yeah, it just
It gets your attention.
it gets your attention, and you have to kind of figure out what you need to do to treat it. I didn't know the proper treatment.
Mud, mud works.
I didn't have mud readily available.
Oh, okay. You live in a condo, the 30th floor.
Where I was yeah, there was a lot of concrete, a lot of cement, as the
Yeah.
Italians would say. Yeah, no, it wasn't fun. I wouldn't recommend anyone to experience that.
Well, I've gone through it's a week now. I've had a summer cold. No, it's not COVID. Relax. Um, and man, in the summer when you get that kind of stuff, it's summer colds are awful. It's really taken a bite out of me.
The benefit of, I mean, there's not really a benefit to having a cold, but getting one in the summertime, at least you can kind of say, all right, let's go outside and get some vitamin D from the sun and warmth.
Yeah, and still go to the beach.
No, for sure.
So that wasn't impeded.
It's one you always scratch your head at that for sure.
Well, I have to tell you, even both things happen in the same week. Both same things happen the same week, which is I had a lot of we had a wonderful week for the beach, and we also had my cold. I had my cold to deal with, so it was a real interesting. It was kind of a transitory thing. So I got to say, the water was as warm as it's felt. And coming out of the water was warm too because we had those 30-degree days, as you remember last week. And it's really nice to be 5 minutes from the beach, drive to the beach, jump in the water. And we don't have air conditioning here. We lack the technology to cool ourselves, or at
Mm.
least cool the house. So yeah, so it's quite the relief to go to the beach. When we talk about the beach, I guess this brings us to the Canadian Football League, and this is the time of the year when normally, I say normally because we're not sure yet, because it is just the beginning of the post Labor Day games. What happens every year is this becomes the sprint to the finish line. The importance of finishing first is just as important as making the playoffs. And so the games become and get more intense, and the players seem to be now, as a team playing the best they can, or the other side where teams start to lose their confidence. I'd like to start with that question for you, and I want to warn people. I didn't prepare David for this, so this is kind of just dropping it on him. But I know he can handle it. The question really is what teams do you think have improved their stock since the beginning of the season?
Oh, I mean, the Argo stock was always high, so I don't know if
Defending
they.
Grey Cup champs does that, I guess.
Yeah, so I guess I can't put them really. I'm gonna take Toronto, Winnipeg, and BC out of it just because they got off to really good starts. I'd say Saskatchewan has, minus the Banjo Bowl. They were on a pretty good, last few weeks, especially with that impressive win in Winnipeg, and they had the win against BC. So I thought, okay, that's a team whose stock is going up. I guess you could say the Edmonton Elks, who've won 3 games after starting their season 0-8.
Hmm.
So I'd say like that's a team there where if Hamilton loses 1 or 2 games and they continue to win, crossover could be a possibility. Maybe it'd be tough. So, but I think Saskatchewan, because I think every other team has so many question marks. I don't know if they've really improved their stocks. I think with Trevor Harris out, Saskatchewan has been able to stay at 500. Not many teams can do that when they lose their quarterback. Look at Ottawa. Look at Hamilton, right? Like those teams have struggled without their starting quarterbacks. Saskatchewan's been able to stay afloat and even won some impressive games with their third string quarterback. So I'd say their stock is I'm high on them right now. I think they're a team that's on the up.
And that's disregarding the teardown that they took from Winnipeg this weekend, and you referred to it as the Banjo Bowl, which of course it is.
Yeah.
Um, you know, I'm so from the beginning of the year, I'll go team by team, just do a little checklist. So Winnipeg, I agree with you. They're a team that we knew from the beginning of the year, right from the exhibition season, we're fired up and ready to go, and they proved it. Um, then you have, of course, BC. Um, I'm going to put them on the other side of the ledger. Um, we talked about the most improved. I'm going to say they were the less improved team from the beginning of the season. They're high in the standings, but I think a lot of us expected them to be higher. If you consider the beginning of the season and how it's moved on, they have fallen a little bit. And I'll say this, and then you can respond to it. And I think it's because they have a quarterback who's inconsistent. It's hot and cold with Adams. VA is a great quarterback. We get that. We know that. We've seen that. But his consistency has been an issue this season. And when he implodes, he just doesn't make little mistakes. He makes a lot of mistakes. That's not to say that this is what I think he is. I'm not saying this is what he is. But unfortunately, this is the same thing that happened in Montreal, where he was very good and then not so good. And now that's happening here in BC. And I'm just wondering, David, is this who he is? Or, I mean, he can improve. I have faith in anybody being able to do well. It's just he hasn't had the ability to be consistently not just great, but good.
Yeah, and sometimes it takes time, but for you get to a point where maybe a guy is who he is, right? Like that's I think of that with McLeod Bethel Thompson, right? If you what was always the thing on him was people saying, he's an okay quarterback, but you can't expect him to take his game to that next level. And when he does try it, it doesn't work out for him. So maybe some quarterbacks you put them in a position to succeed and don't expect them to do more than they need to, then you're fine. It's the quarter like I think of like looking at what Zach Laros and Chad Kelly have done this year and what Claros has done throughout his career is he can go above and beyond. And that's what makes him such a great quarterback. But then if you expect like a Vernon Adams to try to go on above and beyond, it doesn't seem to work out well for him. Like you put him in positions to succeed, he's going to succeed. Sometimes when you put these quarterbacks in a position where they need to where they have to kind of rise above certain challenges they have, that's tough to expect.
Yeah, it's kind of ironic too that his quarterback room mate is Evans, formerly of Hamilton, who basically suffered the same kind of problem where the inconsistency was an issue. BC, with Vernon Adams, the good Vernon Adams, the great Vernon Adams, they're unbeatable. Any game, they can win any game. The fear is, and I think, in the BC fans, is that they really know in their hearts that they could lose any game too. And that's the part that makes me say that they haven't lived up to their expectations. Um, but they still are a really good team, and I repeat, on any given day, they can win. Things go right, and this is just a idiosyncrasy of sports, right? Not every team can win every game. Not every team can win most of their games. Not every team can win the right game, the big game, and that's essentially right now why I put BC in the position of they're not playing as well as they were playing. They need to recover some of that confidence and some of that luster and shine that they had at the beginning of the year, because they looked really good. And they didn't look really good um, towards the part of the season we're at now, and they need to get back some of that luster. So I agree with you in that score. Then we go to Saskatchewan that you talked about as the most improved team, at least in the views, our views from, early in the season. I agree with you 100%. And I think it has a lot to do, and we've talked about this when it comes to quarterbacks. It's great that the Canadian Football League is bringing in, and they're doing this very well, the league as a league, the teams. The third string quarterbacks, I think this is a year of the third string quarterback. The teams that have produced and provided third string quarterbacks that have become first string quarterbacks for the team, like Donagala. Now, why is that? One of the commentators on a CFL broadcast said something that went bing in my head, and it's something I believe. He fits into the game that Saskatchewan's offense wants to play.
Yeah, I mean, if you again, we were talking about expecting your quarterback to go above and beyond. When you put your quarterback in a position to succeed, you're going to get favorable results, right? You play smart football, it's going to work out for your quarterback. But I think when you look at Dolagala, you know, this is somebody who's had experience in so many in different areas, right? This is somebody who played, in the did spend some time in the NFL with the Packers, the Bengals, and the Patriots. So this isn't someone who went right from college to the CFL, right? There was actually I think he was also with the Dolphins too,
Mhm.
right? So there was always some semblance of, maybe there's something there where he could be something if you give him time to get used to the game, right? And so with Dolagala, you play to the strengths when you're going with your third string quarterback, right? You don't expect, okay, we're getting our third guy in. Let's see if he can, do something, be our savior. Like you can't expect that. But I was reading a story on Dolagala from sportsnet.ca actually. Mike Kareen, colleague of mine, and he actually spoke to. I don't know if the name would mean anything to you, but Jim Kubiak,
Mhm.
former NFL quarterback, who is actually a quarterback development coach. This is the same coach who didn't only develop Dolagala, but also developed Chad Kelly. They actually are. I think they actually know each other quite well for that. And he basically talked about Dolagala saying, his career might have been over because he had suffered an injury early in his time where he had I think it was a shoulder injury on his throwing arm. And usually when you are younger and you suffer an injury to your throwing arm, it puts your career in jeopardy. He fought past that. So this is someone who's had to go through a very tough journey to get to where he is. He's determined, and that works out well in a lot of ways for a team that's looking for a spark, right? And also his size doesn't hurt either. I mean, 6'7". There aren't many 6'7" quarterbacks in the CFL right now.
No, 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 no. And the thing of it is it always comes down to, as you know, I know people who, if they follow this show and watch, they probably get tired of hearing me say it, but it is about making mistakes for quarterbacks in the Canadian Football League, because it seems more than even in the NFL or any other football that you watch, sometimes even in sports, period, that the mistakes that the quarterback makes in the Canadian Football League seem to really, really hurt the team. It's funny because that, I guess, because in the Canadian Football League, the quarterbacks are basically the straw that stirs the drink. So you expect a high level of play from them. When they go down to the other end, it has a large impact on what the teams do. Because, quite frankly, as much as the kicking game matters, which it does in field position, the quarterback controls that even more. So, mistakes that lead to a reverse of field position are like turnovers. The same thing, right? They affect the team because it upsets the momentum that a team has. keeps the defense on the field, which makes it harder for them to do their work, and ensures the offense gets more and more opportunity to gain confidence. So yeah, I really enjoy Donegal because of what he doesn't do as much as what he does, and he really does look like a quarterback who's comfortable in his position, and we know in the Canadian Football League that's half the battle for quarterbacks in the Canadian Football League by virtue of it being a new game to most quarterbacks that come to this league.
Yeah, and this is kind of where I think the league needs to really support these younger quarterbacks, because you see how many of them kind of burn out because they're thrown into the fire, right? Cameron Dukes was thrown into a game because, Chad Kelly gets hurt. And you could tell he just wasn't ready for that opportunity because there wasn't really a position. There wasn't an ability for him to really get up to speed and get used to that professional level right away. So I think, yeah, you have to live with the mistakes that the younger quarterbacks make. But if you're willing to take the time to groom them and work with them, the benefits are there. Like, do I think Jake Dolegala can be the savior for the
This guy,
Saskatchewan Roughriders? That one game against Winnipeg, it's tough, right? Because that's a team you're going to have to eventually probably beat, right? To get to the Grey Cup if Winnipeg secures. I think they've already secured the playoff berth, but now they can secure number one in the West, and you have to. It's so much harder to win that second playoff game, especially when you're the road team, right? Winnipeg has that distinct advantage when they're at home. So I really do think that if you're Saskatchewan right now, yeah, you want to see what Dolegala can do, but at the end of the day, you have one quarterback who you brought in that you think can get you to that game, and that's Trevor Harris, right?
absolutely.
But I wouldn't be surprised if they decide, let's continue to go with Dolegala until Harris is brought back, and maybe this is where you decide, what, we like what this guy has done for us. Maybe this is someone we can look at going forward, because we don't know how much longer Trevor Harris is going to be playing in this league anymore, right? He's getting up there in age. Obviously, I'm not going to tell Trevor Harris when it's his time to go.
Or
But
Andrew Harris.
well, Andrew Harris has already made it clear that he's out after the season.
Yeah.
But for Trevor Harris, it's like you can't. I would say that it would, for at least for Saskatchewan, if they feel like this is a time where they need to start looking at that next guy. Dolegala is putting himself in a good position because he's available and he's playing and he's learning.
Oh, he's not just putting himself in a good position. He's putting Saskatchewan in a good position. I mean, when this season started, would we have said the best 1-2 tandem on any team in the Canadian Football League as far as quarterback position is concerned? We wouldn't have put Saskatchewan at the top of that list, and I wouldn't be afraid to do it today.
You know what? They've always had a good defense, right? They've always had one of the top defenses in the league. The running game has improved so much that it's taken some of the pressure off the quarterback. It's just they needed that quarterback, right? How many years have they missed out because quarterback just wasn't good enough? Like Cody Fajardo was good for them, but just not good enough, right?
And the injuries,
And the injuries took a toll, and there was a mental aspect too, where I wouldn't say he was checked out, but you can tell that he wasn't feeling it right at the end there. There was a loss
oh,
of.
absolutely not. He was not. There were not reports, but there were murmurs that the team couldn't play for him, right? Because he was just starting to get very frustrated. It's not always about a team that needs to part ways with a player. Sometimes a player needs to part ways with the team. And that's not to say that Saskatchewan's a horrible place to play, but it is a suggestion that just Cody Fajardo, with all the history, couldn't be a Saskatchewan Roughrider anymore. It's no surprise that he left. And you know, look, and I wanted to mention something when we talk about two good quarterbacks in Saskatchewan. That's really important because, it offers a security blanket for the team that no matter what happens in that game, and if they lose their quarterback, they got another guy that come in there and keep it going because we know how important that is. You mentioned about Dukes with the Argos. The difference between Dukes and Kelly is monumental. So, yeah, I just wanted to inject that.
No, and I do think it's quarter. We're learning right now in the CFL. If you don't have more than one quarterback, you're in trouble, right? And
You need a
so,
starting quarterback under every circumstance.
yes,
There is no circumstance where you can't have a starting quarterback, which by implication is what I'm saying is that the guy that's under center needs to be a starting quarterback and play as such.
right. And so I do think I do like the position that Saskatchewan's in right now because Dolagala has been there for a little bit, right? Yeah, he hasn't played a whole lot, but he was there last year. He got to see it, right? I think he was also there in 2021, if I'm not mistaken, or he was there
You're right. I think it's his third year.
because I think this is his third year, right? So he's had some time to get himself acclimated to the CFL game now, right? So now it's a matter of can we elevate him to now being that next guy for us, the guy for us. That's the
You
big
know,
one for them.
no, the other thing is that historically, and I say historically because is there a quarterback? Is there a starting quarterback? Is there a starting quarterback in the Canadian Football League that has sat on the sidelines waiting for his turn more than Trevor Harris and now has that experience in spades?
Yeah, and look, I think for Trevor Harris, he was willing to come in as a backup in Montreal when Vernon Adams was there. He came to Saskatchewan obviously expecting to be the guy, but pride has to kind of in the team's case, pride has to go out the window a little bit, and you have to go with the quarterback that's going to give you the best chance to win. I say you've right now. If I'm Dolagala, you are auditioning for that opportunity because let's say this Banjo Bowl game kind of goes off the rails now with the momentum that they had before, then you're going to have no choice. But then to go back to the guy that you know, that you brought in to do it for you, right? So
Yeah.
I think
They'll have him soon.
Saskatchewan's in such an advantageous position right now when you think about that.
Well, they're in a better position than they were when he came in the first time this year. That
Yeah.
at the end of the day is he's taken. This is where we've talked about quarterbacks that have come in to replace starters and the success and the failure rate. For every quarterback that's done that. We talk about. We'll go down to the Western Division. We'll talk about Calgary now, and my opinion in Calgary is uh, they came out of the gate better than they're playing now. But I think this is where we all thought they would be. I think they would be fighting for a playoff spot. The problem is they're 2 games down on Saskatchewan. They played an extra game. Saskatchewan has a game in hand, and Saskatchewan has, of course, 6 wins. And I'm looking here, Calgary has 4. And the challenge now they have is not to end up in last place. And their situation has been, again, with inconsistent quarterbacking.
Well, and the big one here for Calgary is it's 1-1 in the season series. The October 13th game in Calgary is massive. If this, let's say, Saskatchewan remains at 500, Calgary finds a way to get there too. The tiebreaker is season series. So that third game is crucial for Calgary. What's even more crucial, putting yourself in a position that if you can't get in through the West, maybe the East is the other option. Like for Calgary, they had an opportunity with the 2 games against Edmonton to say, let's put Edmonton out of in the rear view. Let's put them out of it. But they split it, which is probably one where it's like now you could say like Edmonton has such a tough hill to climb, but Calgary didn't close the door on them either in a way. it's so tough. I Calgary for me, it's they've been better the last few weeks than what we saw at the start of the season, but that start to the season just makes it so tough to trust them. Like their offense has scored in the last, going into last Monday's the rematch of the Labor Day game. They had scored 30 plus points twice, and they put up 23 points. Mayer
Yeah,
has been better. I think the big thing for him is he's cut out the interceptions.
mm,
That's
yeah,
been crucial for him. But now it's the defense. The last thing I would have expected to be the issue for Calgary is you have an 18-point lead. Yeah, you scored 0 points in the fourth quarter, but you also allowed Edmonton to come right
they
back.
came right back. They roared right back. And
And
that was strange for Edmonton because if anything this year, they've established they have a hard time playing better as the game rolls on. This is one of the only games that they've played really well moving forward.
and Trey Ford continues to find ways. Like, and realistically, there was if Edmonton could have easily won the Labor Day game. Trey Ford was just that good, and it just kind of fell apart at the end there for them. Like
Again,
I'm of the belief that if I'm Calgary, you got to do whatever you can to say to yourself, "There's still an opportunity for us here." It doesn't get easy for Calgary, unfortunately. They do have the Owls coming up, so that's gonna be a tough game because you're going up against a team that want. I mean, they're on their bye week, I should say that, so they got some chance to right now to regroup a little bit. But then they got Montreal, Hamilton, Saskatchewan, BC, Winnipeg. It's not an easy schedule because you're going two East teams that, you know what, this could have some playoff implications if you want to get that East crossover. You can't lose to those East teams. Obviously, with Saskatchewan, if they are able to stay within striking distance, that game's important. Those three games are so crucial because you end your season against the Lions and the Blue Bombers. Now, fortunately, the Blue Bombers in that final game might be in a position where they say, you know what, it's our last game before the playoffs. We don't want to risk anything, so we're
they've
not
done it
going.
before.
Right? We're not going to
Yeah,
make a point to put our best guys out there. So that might benefit Calgary in the end there, but man, if they had just won that rematch of the Labor Day game, then you're talking about a 5-8 team versus a 4-9 team. And that looks a little bit better because you're within striking distance of at least Hamilton.
yeah, and the energy that they'll and emotion that they'll have to expend to get to the point where they make the playoffs, you know, is the reverse of what Winnipeg will be doing. We talked about the way Winnipeg is, and then the Argos can fit in that same category where they can rest up players and then give a big push in the playoffs. The big push for some of these teams, in Calgary's on that list. They have to make the big push now to put themselves in the position to be in the playoffs, coming from behind, that being Saskatchewan, and keeping up with Hamilton. And they can't finish tied. They have to have more wins or more points, I guess, than Hamilton. So I agree with you. Calgary's in a tough position. This is an organization with a lot of pride. And last year, I talked about Hamilton and the run that they made that a lot of people didn't believe me that they could make. I put Calgary in that same corner. I really think they can make that move. But the one problem they have is that, for them, it's a tougher road because they're in a division that really, there's some good teams there. Now that Saskatchewan has done what they've done, those three teams are very strong. No insult to the Eastern Division. I love the Eastern Division. It's the one we cover the most, but it's not as strong as the Western Division. So to make advances in the Western Division is a little more difficult. If you look at both Hamilton and Calgary, I know that Hamilton's already got like I said, they've got a game in hand and they've got an extra win. So they've got a leg up on Calgary in that regard. But, the way things pan out, it'll be interesting. is all I can say. I'll give you the last word on Calgary, and then we can focus on Edmonton.
Yeah, I mean Calgary has no room. They have no room for error right now. No margin for error from now until the end of the season. I think one or two more losses. I think that pretty much curtails their chance of the playoffs. And I think now, let's say they believe maybe they take a step back this year. This is where proper evaluation has to happen, because there was opportunities this year for Calgary, and it feels like a real missed chance. And now there's going to be some question marks going forward with this, with how you proceed, especially with Dickinson and how he has to now adjust after his first year in charge.
Yeah, as a GM, and how does he, on the field, he can, as a coach, instruct the players he has, but now he has more impact on the organization by being the general manager. And now he's got to provide players for the coach, the GM, him, the coach, has to have the kind of players that he can move forward. Edmonton is a year. Let's go on the presumption that what we're talking about is Calgary now's got to make some serious decisions about retooling. Edmonton has been in the position of retooling for a couple of years. We might be seeing, they might be a little, if that's the tack that Calgary takes, Edmonton will be a year ahead, because I think they've done their retooling. I think this team is better than they played. And I think they have, I think their bar is a little lower, obviously, because of where they were. But I think this season, what they've done is they've brought back respectability to the EE. And the EE has a lot of, want to talk about pride. I talked about Calgary. You want to talk about historical pride. Is there a team that has a better history than the Edmonton Eskimos, coming from a guy here in Toronto? Not really. There aren't, there's none better, that's for sure, than historically, than the Edmonton Eskimos. And they're motivated. And I really think it's amazing how difficult it's been for Chris Jones, a guy who really gets close to the players and who has an evaluation skill that, I don't know, when it comes to coaches and players, are there many guys that have proven in their time as in charge that they've been able to evaluate players that make the team better faster? No, but he has had a real problem at quarterback. And that, unfortunately, once again, without a starting quarterback in the Canadian Football League, your team doesn't have that much of a chance to win. You and I wondered why the quarterback they're using now, they didn't use sooner. There was no talk about injury. Is it a coincidence that the offensive coordinator is gone and now Trey Ford is, has the handle on the, the team? I wonder if that was the issue, because I'm just saying it by process of elimination. If it wasn't an injury, then there's something about the ability of the quarterback to perform under the leadership of the offensive coordinator. That's a choice. That's not I don't know whether that choice was made because they felt it was better not to have him there, less of a threat for their previous number one quarterback.
Well, two things there. It wasn't just the quarterback change; it's also the offensive coordinator change as well.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be a little bit of revisionist. What if we had done that differently? I do agree. There's a little bit of that with Edmonton. Um, I do think Trade Ford has given this team the jolt in the arm that they have definitely needed. So now the question becomes, how do you go up from here? That's always the toughest thing, because they've been making improvements, but now teams are going to start figuring out ways that they want to attack Trey Ford, right? They got a little bit more film on him. They're going to try to take advantage of a little bit of the inexperience. So Edmonton's got the real tough challenge right now of how do they elevate this further, because even though they've made improvements, they're still in the position that they are in, right? So I do think Trey Ford has given me the ability to say that I think there's a future here for Edmonton if they take this and they give Trey Ford the tools to be successful. Not just the tools to be successful, but the coach is saying, let's make sure we're letting this guy do what he needs to do too, and not try to put chains on around him in any way. They haven't done it yet, but because right now they're in a position where they're gonna live and die with what he does. Eventually, you don't want the coach to say, let's um let's not be so willy nilly about running the ball with him, right? Let's try to make him more of a pocket passer. When we all know his his uh his bread and butter right now is his legs. And then eventually that should open up things for other guys, right? Because defenses have to account for that. So like they got a really unique quarterback right now because there aren't many quarterbacks in the CFL that are so elusive like him. Yeah, Caleros can be elusive, but not to with the athleticism that Trey Ford has. Chad Kelly a little bit, but again, I think Trey Ford right now is the most athletic quarterback in the CFL. They just got to get him to a position where he can be the best all-around quarterback in the CFL while not, mistaking his identity, which is first and foremost a quarterback that can use his legs.
I'll wave the red and white flag now and say there's probably no other quarterback that has more experience in the Canadian game.
Yeah.
So, that's an asset too, right? He's way ahead of the game in that regard. And yeah, he is very fleet of foot, and that is a big asset. So in other words, I guess to summarize my feelings about Edmonton is they're on this. Both Edmonton and Calgary are Calgary not so much, but close to putting themselves in a position where they have to start thinking about next year. We know that Edmonton's in that position by virtue of that loss to Calgary. If they had a beaten Calgary in the return match after Labor Day, we might be talking about them actually having a shot at the playoffs. But this is really hard because now the best they can do is finish 8-10, and that means that all Saskatchewan has to do with their last 6 games is win 2 games, which I think Saskatchewan can do. Crossing over is a possibility, of course, but that would require basically Hamilton to, to not play very well at all till the end. They've done that, but I don't think this is the team that's going to do that. So yeah, Edmonton, they're in recover mode. They're getting ready for next year. I think they're fully entranced by what they can do next year. They're judging players that are important not just in next year, but the year after that as well, that they're going to figure out because now they want to continue trending upward. This is a team that was 0. They were 0 for a long time. And we all know how long they were an 0 for at home. I mean, they broke records. So yeah, they will be a better team. And, for the Edmonton fans, the double E, I'm happy for them that they have a team that they can be a little more proud of and support better. Always like seeing CFL fans sharing in hope, because hope is the most important thing. And that doesn't mean any of these other teams lack hope. It's just that Edmonton is trending up in that regard. So, because the bar for them was much lower.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. When the bar was so low for this organization, everyone's like, "Well, they can't get any worse, right? It can only go up."
It got pretty worse pretty long.
I think a big one for Edmonton is some teams when you're at the bottom, you can kind of get a head start at the future.
Yep.
You can say, you know what? We know that the playoffs technically could still be a possibility if they win out and some other players win, other teams lose. But in my opinion, what I would say is take advantage of an opportunity right now where maybe other teams aren't thinking far ahead, and you're be in the long haul, right? Do what the Argos did, right? When they brought in Clemens, they said, you know what, we're going to work on ensuring the team's success in the future and putting the infrastructure in place there. And they got a new president right now. After the other one, there was a mutual party place there. Do what you can to give the Edmonton fans a chance to say, you know what, we want to make sure that this team gets back to, as you said, in the very beginning, back to being the organization that was a proud organization, a winning organization, one of the top organizations in the CFL. It's going to take you don't want to say it's going to take time because how much time is it this team had? So basically, you got to say, let's put ourselves in a position to make ourselves like the next Toronto, the team that's going to be consistently competing for a championship, not just a one and done.
Great segue. That's what we'll talk about next. We'll go to the East Division. The Knothole Gang in Edmonton. Yes, the template's there for them, and there's a lot of similarity between them and Toronto. Edmonton had glory days, and maybe they'll return to them. So it's going to take some work. In the case of Toronto, you mentioned Pinball Clemens. Pinball has kept his promise. And, when it comes to sports and when managers at whatever level or CEOs of organizations talk about, we're going to have ourselves a consistent team that will compete for the Grey Cup every year. It's not that they don't want to do it. It's not that they break promises, but it's about following through and executing on that theory, because it's only a theory until you actually do it. Well, this is the third year in a row that the Toronto Argonauts have been a powerhouse in the Canadian Football League. I think we can say that. I know it sounds a little weird, but they have been a powerhouse for the last 3 years. They made it to first in 3 years ago. They lost to Hamilton in the final, the Eastern final. And of course, they won the Grey Cup last year, and now they're dominating at a 10-1 record. This is Winnipeg Blue Bomber territory that they're in. This is them and their fans feeling that their team is unbeatable. But let's be clear about something, and this is where process comes in. This team has trended upward in my mind. If you ask every CFL fan, and I say that specifically because not every CFL fan believed or even believes today that Toronto deserved to win the Grey Cup last year, right? So they weren't the number one team. So they had some room to improve, right? In other people's eyes. I'm sure now, I believe so anyway, anybody wants to be realistic. A lot of people who had doubts that the Argos deserved to win the Grey Cup last year are going, oh, I see. So they got better in the Grey Cup, and we just witnessed the change in the team from a good team to a great team, and they are a great team. And so I'm not saying that they've improved drastically this season, but what they've done is they've proven anybody who doubted them as being a dominant team in the Canadian Football League, they've proven it, and they've done it with a quarterback change.
The big one for me is we got a chance, obviously, after the game to talk to Ryan Dinwiddie, and it was one of the first times I have heard him say, we got a chance, or, I kind of asked him, like, the playoffs are booked, kind of what's next? He said, etching ourselves as the greatest Argo team of all time. One of the first times I actually really heard him say that. The Argos have been very, very cautious about the messaging that they have used throughout the season. They every week they say we're looking to go 1-0. We're looking to go 1-0. This is the first time I've ever heard Ryan Dinwiddie kind of say, let's now push ourselves to being the best that this organization has ever had. And that to me is that speaks to the culture that this team now has. It wasn't there before. There were so many issues before that now Argos fans, I'm not going to say they're spoiled, but this is an organization that has done it the right way. There was some pain, necessary turnover, and now it's about sustaining that, and they believe right now that they have put themselves in a position to really do something special.
And it's a lesson for Edmonton and the rest of the league, really, except Winnipeg, because Winnipeg has this part figured out, and that is depth, and that is being able to move forward with the players you have, and then with the players you lose, bringing in other players. This game was a game that played with, well, they've been playing all year with regulars out. It's not like it's the first game they played with regulars out, but it was they had a tough week last week with injuries, and they plugged and played really well. We saw number 81. We interviewed him. Canadian rookie. Looked outstanding out there. You know, we it's all about depth. So yeah, they've trended up, and they've done it because they've been able to have an organization, as Pinball promised, that would challenge every year. Not because they had the best quarterback, not because they have the best defense, not that because they have the best offense, not because they have the best kicker, but because they have the best team. And the team concept with the Argos under Dinwiddie has been the primary um, intention every week. It's always been, and whenever we do interviews, it's about we. What I've done is because of my guys. What I've accomplished is because of the men around me. We're a family here. And a lot of teams can say all that stuff, David, but in Winnipeg the past few years, they've said stuff like that. It rang true. Why? Because they executed on that assertion. And they've been assuredly, you know, Winnipeg and Toronto now are together. I think it's safe to say that they are together in the dominant teams in the Canadian Football League. It's been a while since we've had two teams this dominant in the league in the Eastern and Western Division. We had the Hamilton Tiger Cats, who were dominant during the regular season, were an incredibly dominant team in the regular season. They just weren't able to carry that greatness through in the Grey Cup. And that's the difference as far as I'm concerned. So, for those of you that think I'm disrespecting Hamilton and their regular seasons, nope, not at all. Just that the difference is that you have Winnipeg and Toronto who've been great during the season, broke records during the season, and then followed up with a Grey Cup championship. And that's something that makes this following Grey Cup coming up really interesting because the bigger they are, David, the harder they fall. And we've seen that in the Canadian Football League many times. So we've got two opportunities here for teams to rise up and beat Dominoes.
I think when you look at Toronto, you brought this up. When was the last time you saw an East team this dominant? Right, like the East have we constantly heard people say, "Oh, the East is just getting by. The East is just getting by," and then they pick up the win in the Grey Cup, like what Toronto did,
Ottawa.
right? Like Ottawa and things like that. Toronto twice, actually, if you think about it.
Absolutely.
And for me, this is Toronto's chance to now say, okay, well now we're now we are the best in the league. So what are people going to say about that now? To me, there's a little bit of that, I think.
And that's what Dinwiddie's talking about. It's the legend that they leave behind. They'll become a legendary team if they can win back to back. So the pressure's on them in the sense of putting them in not only the greatest Argo team. What Argos have won back to back Grey Cups. It's not that'll make them the greatest Argo team. It'll be the way they've dominated throughout. And that's the key for them.
I do think that's key for them. I think for Toronto, it's not losing focus. I think this group is focused. I think they understand what they need to do to accomplish their goal. I think they have the coaching staff that's going to keep them on the ball, right? And it's also, I think they have the players to do it too, the leaders to do it. I think that's the big one for me. For what I've seen from this Argos team to other Argos teams I've covered, it's the players themselves that are policing this. They know what they need to do to get the job done. And so for me, it's like, okay, you've now proven that you've got the talent to do it. Let's see how any sort of sense of adversity that they face. The only one really that they faced was the one game that they lost Chad Kelly, and it didn't work out for them. I was talking with with JB, the co-host of X's and Argos, and we kind of said to ourselves, like, what is going to keep this team from reaching their full potential? And for us, it was an injury to Chad Kelly. Knock on wood that obviously that doesn't happen. Chad Kelly getting hurt or on defense, the lack of depth, especially in the secondary.
which is being tested, which is being tested at
It
this
is
time.
being tested, and it's had its struggles. There's no lying, but the Argos offense has put up well over 35 points a game for most of the season. That it's kind of negated that. So they've been fortunate in that regard. But you know what happens when the offense doesn't have its best day? Now we've seen when it's happened. Other parts of the team do step up. So I think that's this mark of how good this team can be. Is that okay? One injury doesn't derail us, or one bad game doesn't change anything. Collective group itself knows what they need to do to get the job done. So um, I'm I think when if anyone asks me right now, it's tough to say anything other than a Winnipeg Toronto final, just based on what we've seen from these teams. It's just we all know in the CFL it takes one game for it all to be undone.
The good news for the rest of the teams is they have a lot of games to develop and trend to being a lot better. They've got lots of time to make that happen. Montreal being one of those teams. Montreal again, they're 6-6 for their season, and that pretty well describes who Montreal are. Coming into the season, I think a lot of people knew that they were going to be a really good team. I don't think they've gone beyond what we thought they would be. 6-6 is probably what I'll say is what would have been expected of them.
I think, yeah, I think for Montreal, you got a brand new coach, you're right, new owner. There's a lot of change there, and it can be overwhelming for players, especially those who have been there and are trying to adjust to things being different. So I do think for Montreal, like I wasn't very high on them. I thought, they lost some good players because the uncertainty of free agency and in the ownership situation made them behind the eight ball. But I'll give them credit that they've kept themselves in that position to at least say we're going to make the playoffs. It's just a matter of can we put together that good game, that good game that you need. And what that game against Toronto, the last game against Toronto showed me is the moment can get too big for them.
Yeah, but it was mistakes for them, mistakes that are erasable. I mean, four turnovers in the first half. That's crazy.
Four turnovers in the first half, but it's also your top receiver getting himself kicked out of the game because the
A punch.
a punch because they were very intense. The intensity, that was a team that was coming in with too much intensity. There and somebody might say, but like too much
No,
intensity.
no, you're right. The intensity has to be controlled. There
You
has to
have to
be.
control yourself because there are rules. There are rules in the game. You can't just go out and just make it seem like I'm not saying the rules didn't apply to them, but like this is the issue I have sometimes with CFL players is they tend to get too over the top because the emotion gets to them. And you
Absolutely.
not let the emotion get to you in a game where everyone's eyes are on you, right? That was a big
Absolutely.
game for Montreal because everyone wanted to see can this Montreal team actually be good enough to knock off the Argos? And that game suggests to you that they're not.
Hamilton, the beginning of the year, many thought that Bo Levi Mitchell would make a difference. On my etch a sketch, it said injuries, health is an issue, and that so they're really where I thought they'd be because I just didn't think that Bo Levi Mitchell was healthy enough to, and they put all their eggs in a basket of a guy who's trending sideways at the best, downward in most uh, in most people's minds, right? So that's my take on Hamilton.
Yeah, Hamilton for me, they when they signed Bo Levi Mitchell, it was a big gamble. It was a big, big gamble, and I wasn't sure why they wanted to put themselves in that position. I understand that the Grey Cup was there this year, but man, you were hedging a lot of your capital, especially for Orlando Steinauer, on a quarterback that, you know what, 5 years ago, that move would have been perfect for Hamilton. That would have been the exact move they would have needed, but they made that move too late, right? They went after a quarterback that nobody really wanted. Like, I don't know how many other teams are going after Bo Levi Mitchell. How
For
many
that
teams are,
cap hit, for that cap hit,
right? We had heard maybe Toronto was looking because they wanted to get that veteran guy to push Chad Kelly. That proved to be an unwise, would have been
well,
an unwise. I mean,
again,
look, I mean, maybe in a Toronto system, Bo Levi Mitchell would actually work out better than he has in Hamilton. That could certainly be true, but Hamilton, um, like, and people saying, well, they have a chance, like they're going to probably make the playoffs. I'm like, yeah, but I don't see how much farther they can get.
absolutely.
They got outclassed by Toronto, who played bad in the Labor Day game, and their standards would have suggested they didn't play well enough. So, what makes you think that this team can make it when it matters most, and the other team is going to be at their best? I just don't see it from them this year. This is a year where they got to really seriously decide what type of team they want to be going forward.
Well, we'll see. We got a minute left, if not less. Ottawa. I'm going to ask this question: what's in the water in Ottawa? Because the NHL team and the CFL team, both for me, I thought much higher of them last year. These two teams aren't a parallel for me. The last couple of years, I thought both the Ottawa teams were going to make improvement. I am not devastated. Well, maybe I am, because I have some friends in Ottawa and Ottawa fans. Very disappointed in how their season has gone. And I understand about injuries and stuff like that. I get it. I get it. But still, it just doesn't seem like this is the Ottawa team I thought it could be, even without Mazzoli.
I think with Ottawa, you're learning what you need to have in order to be a good team in the CFL, a playoff team, like a team fighting for the playoffs. They just don't have it. They do not have the personnel there. I don't think, like Kahari Jones, we know he's a decent offensive coach, but the tools weren't there for him, right? He doesn't have. I don't think he has the pieces, and I think they need to. They're a team right now that have the advantage of what I said Edmonton could do. You know what, your season, curtains on your playoff chance. I know that's not easy to say, but you say to yourselves, let's take a step back, evaluate, because this is the first year with a new coach who has never been a head coach Bob Dyson never been really a head coach in the CFL. This is his opportunity to say, you know what, the what we didn't work. What can we do to change it?
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to leave that. You'll get the last word. Thanks for doing this, David.
Thank you, Frank.
My pleasure. This has been CFL Talk. Follow us on Candid Frank Stanisci on YouTube, and David Sudi at David Morassutti on Twitter. Thanks, everyone.